Economics. What's the big deal? Seems like every time you turn around, you got to talk about economics. You got to take a course in economics. Every major seems to want a course in economics. Well, what is economics? And why is it so important that we have to study it? Well, let's take a look. We can trace the word back, middle of the 16th century, Middle French, économique. Well, what were they talking about? Well, look a little further back in Latin, economicus. Or look back even further to the Greek. Two words combined, oiko, meaning house, and nomos, meaning manager. So the Greek term oikonomikos, relating to household management, we're starting to get the sense of the word. Economics is all about managing your resources, managing your life, and hopefully managing it to make it successful. I would think that would make it kind of important. I don't think any of us want to fail. So what is economics? Economics is a way of thinking. It's a vocabulary, a language to be able to explain, think about what's going on around us. What do we need to do? What things are important? And it helps us make the decisions in our lives that will determine whether our lives are ultimately successful or not. Our individual lives and the lives we live together collectively as a community, as a nation. The study of economics is about the study of your life. Any economics textbook will tell you that economics is the study of the allocation of scarce resources. Said more simply, it simply helps you ask and answer the question, what are you going to do with what you've got? Microeconomics addresses this from the perspective of an individual as a consumer. It also talks about the decisions that you have to make as a small organization, let's say a business that's trying to maximize its profits. Macroeconomics addresses those same questions from the perspective of an economy or a society or a nation. What are you going to do with what you've got? In an economics course, we build the terminology, the concepts, some models, and we build a process of thinking that helps you address these questions more intelligently, more logically, and hopefully helps you get better answers for your future. If we're going to talk about what are you going to do with what you've got, certainly at the microeconomics level, let's say for you and I as individuals, the first thing we've got to do is examine what kind of resources do we have available. This might mean how much money do you have, or can you borrow? How much time do you have available? How many hours are there in a week, by the way? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are 168 hours in a week. And unlike many other resources like money, you can't put time in a bank and go back and get it when you need it. Don't forget that. Do you have any particular talents or knowledge? A particular level of intelligence, either intelligence in the intellectual sense or what we call emotional intelligence, the ability to work well with other people, to understand them. What are your people skills like? What sort of access do you have and understanding do you have to and of information? These are resources that we need to take a close look at and ask, what do I have? How can I go about getting more? Once we understand the resources we have, maybe we understand why we need to improve them and increase them so as to increase our options in the future. Are resources fixed in amount? Well, we said time was, recall, 168 hours in a week. What about other resources? In economics, we tend to talk about resources in four categories: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, at least in most economies. Land refers to all natural resources, so that includes the forests and the rivers, but it includes the climate of a particular location. Are those fixed in nature? And the answer, of course, is well, not entirely fixed, but it's pretty easy to diminish them, to deplenish them with overuse. So can we renew them? Can we restore them and reuse them? We look at labor on the macro level now. We're looking at what are our land resources, what are our labor resources, and that labor in macroeconomics refers to all human effort, not simply wage hour, but from the efforts of a physician or a research scientist on down to the person who's delivering the mail, the person driving the truck. What do we know about labor? Is it fixed in quantity? No. In fact, we can increase labor, of course, through increasing population growth rates. And by the way, we can also see a decrease in labor if we see that a population is not replenishing itself, which is a problem in some countries. Capital. This term has a unique use in macroeconomics. Unlike most other business courses where it means financial capital or money, in macroeconomics, capital refers to equipment and machinery, goods used to produce other goods. Okay? And then the last category of resources in a macro sense we call entrepreneurship, which is the ability to combine those resources in some form or fashion and sell them at a profit. So again, this is the traditional listing of resources: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. But is that all there is in an economy? Well, there's something else that can go on. It's called the principle of exchange. It's called trade. It's called business. And there's a certain synergy, a certain built-in growing energy that evolves when people and then businesses engage in producing goods and services and trading them with one another, preferably through some medium of currency. Through the process of trade and exchange, each of us can improve our positions. But of course, if you're going to enter into an exchange, into a trading, even a barter system, you've got to have something worthwhile, something people are willing to pay for. We'll mention this principle of exchange as we go along further in the course. Think about this. Does a study of history give us better answers to our questions on what are you going to do with what you've got? If we study what we did with what we had, can we learn some lessons that'll help us make better decisions as we go forward? Think of it perhaps this way. What you are is a result of what you did with what you had. Are you pleased so far? And of course, what we do with what we have now is going to make all the difference in the world in what we have in the future. And I think the quote from George Santayana is repeated a lot, but I think there's a lot of truth in it. If you can't learn from the past, you're going to repeat the same stupidities again and again and again until you learn. That's true on an individual basis, and it's true on a macroeconomic international basis. So the study of history is going to be an essential part of the study of macroeconomics. Kind of beating the drum again. Who and what you are today is directly a result of the choices you made in the past. Now, I didn't say that there weren't some things that happened that you didn't have any control over. Sometimes good things happen, sometimes bad things happen. But think back to the choices you've made in your life and ask, how big an influence did those have on where you are today? And are you happy with where you are today? Hopefully that's a sobering but not depressing experience. But then think further. Your tomorrow is directly dependent upon the choices that you make today. You can make choices that will open doors to your future, that will create opportunities, wonderful experiences, lovely people in your life. Or you can make excuses for not doing the things you should have done. You can make decisions that are poorly made and see your future narrow down more and more and more until it becomes nothing more than a very small light at the end of a tunnel. Yes, I understand many things are out of our control, but our decisions are what we can control, and how we choose to decide will determine how our futures take shape. Have you ever heard this phrase? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Do you know people who do that? Do you know of countries that do that? With people who do that, we typically see that their living standards, their quality of life, their enjoyment of life doesn't much change. We see the same thing on a national basis. We see countries which have decision patterns made that continue to keep them in the past and continue to keep their citizens reduced to a very low standard of living. Maybe that is, for example, corruption in their government. Maybe that is abuse of some significant part of their population. Maybe it is a refusal to bring education into their environment and improve their productivity. But if things aren't getting better and you keep doing the same thing, maybe you ought to take a look at why you keep repeating yourself. If we cannot learn from the past, as individuals as well as nations, we don't just condemn ourselves to a dim future. We condemn our children to that same future. So economics, particularly right now, macroeconomics. It's the study of what you and we were, how we got there, the choices we face for the future, and what we will become.